Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to IsraelCast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Stephen Shalowitz, first reminding you that for over 120 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, and connecting high school and college students to Israel. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, jnf.org. All right, on this episode, we are absolutely delighted to welcome attorney Ron Bar-Yoshafat to the program. Now, Ron is the deputy director of the Kohelet Policy Forum, a Jerusalem-based, non-partisan think tank dedicated to promoting the values of individual liberty and free markets, Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, and representative democracy. Ron's varied career has seen him working for the legal department of the Knesset and working as project manager of the Israeli Jewish Congress. He's an author working on his third book and is working on a PhD in history. He has conducted numerous Israel advocacy speaking tours in the United States, Australia, and Europe. He's on one right now. And if his name sounds somewhat familiar, well, he was the speaker who was to address the students at Berkeley on Monday, the 26th of February, when a mob of some 200 pro-Palestinian agitators surrounded the auditorium. A door was broken, at least one window smashed. Jewish students were harassed, and the event ultimately had to be canceled because the university couldn't protect them. And Ron Bar-Yoshafat joins us now via Zoom to talk about that, the war, and more. Ron, it is so wonderful to welcome you to IsraelCast.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I am as well, very happy to have you. And we should give our listeners a little bit of behind the scenes because on September 11th of all days, 2023, we actually recorded a full episode of IsraelCast, and the intention was for it to be released sometime in the middle to the end of October. And of course, the horrific October 7th attack took place, and we changed around all of our programming because that conversation, as fascinating as it was, talking about Israel and democracy and the parties in Israel and the left and the right and the center, and really you gave us a terrific landscape. It really wasn't appropriate to launch it at that time. And we know you've been crazy busy doing many things, which we're going to talk about right now. So we're doing the interview right now. We wanted to have you back. We had no idea what was going to happen on the campus at Berkeley, okay, which I want to get to. But for the moment, let's go back, though, to October 7th, because certainly it turned the entire country of Israel upside down, but it turned your life upside down in many ways. You're a reservist. You were going to be getting married, which you ultimately did. So talk a little bit about October 7th, where you were, and then what you did in the immediate aftermath.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of a background.
Sure.
I fought in the second Intifada. That was my active army service. I was a soldier in a unit called Maglan. My job was to physically capture terrorists. My first army reserves was the Second Lebanon War. That was the first time I came back to the army, not as an active soldier, but as a reservist. And I serve every year, regardless of the war, between 1 to 2 months. Every year as an officer in a regiment called 551. It's a regiment. Regiment is about 1,500 soldiers. It's a regiment that has soldiers from Maglan, of the Van, it goes. It's considered to be a very prestige regiment, and the officers train a lot to be prepared for any scenario. Why am I saying all of this? Because it means that in my house, I always have a bag ready to go to war in case something happens. It can be either training or war, but you have a bag ready with you. On October 7th, I was actually at Shul getting my Aliyah because it was the last Shabbat before my wedding. And I heard a siren. I went to a very early minyan. I did not want to make a fuss out of the whole wedding issue, whatever. So I wanted to keep it small and simple. Unlike the venue that was supposed to be 500-600 people, a gigantic wedding venue, my Shabbos in the shul, I wanted to make very small and intimate. And there was a siren just as I was getting my Aliyah. Now, a siren in Jerusalem is something that you hear sometimes, but it's not very common. Several sirens, one after the other, is extremely uncommon. I went outside of the shul and I saw someone that I know, a colonel in the army, a religious guy, with his army uniforms, and he's driving. I was like, okay, something has happened. So I went quickly to my apartment, opened my phone, and I saw we did not understand the magnitude of the atrocities at that time. We only knew that a few hundreds were murdered. Um, there were rumors about 50 hostages. We didn't know how horrible it actually was, but it's enough to make you say, okay, I'm switching to my army uniform and going directly to my army base. Which, by the way, in hindsight, might have been a mistake. Maybe the best thing would have been to go directly to the south, as some of my friends did at that time. So I went to my army base, and at that time I thought the main problem right now is with at that time my fiance, now my wife, because she knows I'm going to be in the army. We talked about this many times, and she knows where I serve. She's Shomer Shabbos also, so she's not going to be able to use her phone. And when she is going to be able to open her phone, I'm not going to be with my phone because when the officers when we have our meetings to prepare to make plans, we don't have our phones with us because Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran are tapping our phones. So I knew I was going to be unable to talk to her. Eventually, when I had the opportunity to give her a call, I said, "What are we going to do with the wedding?" Now, it's actually interesting because 50 years ago, during the Yom Kippur War, there were similar events, similar incidents, and they asked a very big rabbi, Rav Elyashiv Zatzal, they asked him, "What do you do in such a case? Do you postpone the wedding or do you go on with it?" And I liked the response that he gave. He said, "For such an important question, only one person can answer, and that is the Kala, that is the bride. If the bride says you continue with the wedding, you continue with the wedding. If she says you postpone, you postpone." So my wife said we're going to continue with the wedding. My battalion officer said he's okay with giving me a break to go home, get married, and come back. So that's what I did. I went home. The day of our marriage, I switched my army uniform to the suit that I got for the venue. We got married in a very, very small place, Yad Sarah Charity Hall. I think we had 40 people, probably half of them we don't know. They just came to like do a little bit of Mesameach Chatan V'Kala to dance with us, so we won't be completely by ourselves. And the next day I went back to the army base.
So the honeymoon's on hold.
Well, the honeymoon happened here in America before I began my speaking tour. We went to Hawaii actually. Someone someone was very moved by our sob story, and they said we're going to help you with plane tickets to America. And then we just had to pay for the flights to Hawaii. So we spent a week in Hawaii.
And let me say, the rest of your life is a honeymoon, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Beautiful.
very happy we got married. Not the
Yeah.
venue that we planned for. We did have an event after I got discharged from the army. Not 600 people, but it was a pretty big party, which was like a closure for us. And there's also a dilemma. I had a dilemma with the wedding itself because it's hard to be happy when when everything is going on. It's something very interesting I would like to share. There's a very famous Israeli, Noam Jacobson. He's a singer and a comedian and does a lot of stuff, does videos. And he was supposed to be the singer at my wedding. And he came, even though it was a different time and a different location, he came to sing for us at the wedding. And he came and he told me this just before the ceremony began. He said, "Look, from your wedding, I'm going to the funeral of my nephew. I'm here because our victory is to be happy and to establish homes in Israel. I'm going to be 100% happy for your wedding, and you also, you're gonna leave all of the worries that you have, you're gonna leave it aside, and for the next few hours, you're gonna be extremely happy." And it helped me to hear that because you have conflicting values. Your friends are in the base. You're in the middle of this catastrophe, and it's like, okay, he's right. This is the biggest victory I think for the Jewish people. The fact that we are able to have. By the way, I think I started a trend. After me, there are a lot of people who either proposed before. They were a little bit hesitant before. They said, okay, we're going to go with it. We're going to propose, or actually got married during the war.
And in their fatigues.
Some did it in the army units, in
Yeah.
the army bases. Some also like me took a half a day break
But what
and
I
got
mean is that some got married in their army uniforms.
yeah. Some got married in the army
Even the
uniform.
kalas, even the brides.
Yes, yeah.
So before we move on to Gaza and what you were doing there, I'm just wondering, you mentioned before we started rolling that your wife is a trauma therapist. So how was she coping during this whole time, and what was her state of mind?
Well, maybe you can have a full episode with her, though I think that she's a little
I'd
bit
love
more
to.
camera shy than I am, but she's been fantastic. I think that um, everyone who's staying at home, I think that their job is so much more difficult. I would not want to be in her place. She's been extremely supportive in ways that I cannot imagine. I would not be able to do this. So yeah, she's also a new Ola. She made Aliyah to Israel, so she did not have the experience of getting adjusted to, let's have a little bit of protective edge and pillar of defense before we go to an all-out war.
Where's she from?
Originally, she was from New York, and
Did her parents make it over for the wedding?
no, the wedding. Well, she had one brother who actually made it to Israel a little bit beforehand, but the rest of her family was not there. And she doesn't have family here, so she was by herself for this time. I know a lot of my friends said, tell her to visit my wife and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you want to feel very comfortable and not always to feel like you have to, um, you want to be in a place where you can take your shoes off and not ask if it's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
But one of
so
the beautiful things about Israel, if I can just interrupt you, is that there's such achdut now. And it's really like everyone is part of a family. You get invited to people's places, and homes are open for people. And it's really Am Echad Guf Echad. And I think that's a very beautiful thing, even though one doesn't have one's blood relatives with them. We are all one big family.
the support has been amazing, not just for me, I think for all of the Israelis. And yes, I agree with you. It's just a shame that it only happens when we are in times of distress.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll always have this also in times of comfort. But yeah,
Right.
you're
All right. Well, listen, thank you for sharing that. It's an absolute beautiful story, and we wish you both just a lifetime full of good health and happiness. Well, let's move on now. So you're at the base, and I know you get deployed into Gaza. And to the extent that you can talk about your experiences there and your thoughts really from a 30,000-foot approach in terms of the mission that the IDF has in Gaza, what do you think that the West is getting right in terms of their knowledge of what's happening and really what that mission is all about?
I started this morning reading the headlines of the New York Times. I think we live in two different universes, me and the people who read and write in the New York Times. The mission of the war right now, the main two missions, is to bring back the hostages and to annihilate Hamas. Because we had a ceasefire on October 6th, and on October 7th, the biggest catastrophe for the Jewish people since the Holocaust has happened. And I want to share one story just so we'll understand why I say that I think we live in two different separate universes. When we were in Gaza, we were in a house after it was bombed because that house had explosives in it, and we didn't want to send the soldiers before we bombed the house. And in the house, there was a big bag of flour, and there was also a big container of olive oil. And now we had a dilemma. Some officers, and just one more thing to know, we are going to detonate the house completely because we have to get to a tunnel that's underneath the house. So there's nothing going to be left from that, not from the flour, not from the olive oil. And now we have a dilemma. Some officers are saying that because we have convoys with food coming from Israel, we shouldn't touch the food. Doesn't matter if no one else is going to use it. ובביזה לא שלחו ידם, as they say in the book of Esther. We're not here to loot, so we shouldn't touch anything that we find there. Other officers said, with all due respect to the army rations and the tuna cans, people want to dip their food in some olive oil, and they can make something like bread from this flour. And they said no one else is going to use it afterwards. We're going to explode the whole house. Now you can have your own moral decision what is correct and what is not, but this discussion is taking place while you hear people shooting from all different directions, RPGs, AK-47, M16, Israeli airstrikes, artillery from the enemy, artillery from the F, and we're having this moral discussion. And then I hear people saying, "You guys are committing a genocide." I mean, we're having a moral debate if you can use the flour that's about to be exploded just because it's not ours to use, and we're being accused of the most horrible atrocities. I think it's two different universes that we live in. I just want to say, I'm not saying that you cannot find an IDF soldier that does something wrong. I'm saying that for the most part, 99.9% of the soldiers, and obviously the orders and the commanders and the officers, they're not in the same ballpark as the accusations against Israel. So that's what I was trying to say when I'm saying that it's just two different universes. What is it the West is not getting? There are two accusations. They're basically the same, but from the other side. People outside of Israel are saying, why is Israel carpet bombing Gaza? Like, why are you just bombing all of Gaza? Some Israelis are saying, how come Israel is not just bombing all of Gaza? The truth of the matter is that Israel cannot bomb all of Gaza. Israel does not have 300,000 smart missiles. I don't think America has 300,000 smart missiles to bomb every single house in Gaza. But even if it would have, it would not have solved anything. So that's why the IDF would not do it. Of course, obviously also for moral reasons, because the enemy is underground and the civilians are on the ground. Now, if I want to be able to find a rocket can be in the diameter of smaller than a tiny laptop. It's long, but the diameter is very, very small. And you can find it next to a tree in someone's backyard, which means that unless you step foot there specifically, you're not going to be able to find it. In one of the places that we were in Gaza, we knew that there are no terrorists in that area for sure, but they were still able to fire rockets at Israel from 100 and 150 yards from us, which is extremely frustrating. But the thing is that it's connected underground with a wire to someone who can be half a mile away, just pressing a button. Unless you're stepping foot on that, you would not find it. Tunnels. When people envision in their mind tunnels, they're thinking of a tunnel where you have to crawl in to get from one place to the other. You have places in Gaza where you can have a four-car lane tunnel. There are Hamas leaders who drove their jeeps from one side to the other. They have enough food, ammunition, gas, oxygen tanks, computer screens. I'm trying to think of a way I can explain how huge that is. I'll just share one.
Well, you said it's a four-lane highway.
It's some of the towns there are. You also have small towns. Some of the towns
Sure.
there are huge, four-lane highway. Yes, and by the way, people sometimes think it's like a one straight line. No, it's a very advanced tunnel. It can have several floors, go up, go down, take a right turn, take a left turn, has doors in it, has traps for soldiers. So if you want to find the hostages, if you want to stop them from manufacturing weapons, if you want to stop them from throwing rockets at Israel, you're going to have to be in every single square inch in Gaza. If you're going to go to every square inch of Gaza, you're going to have to bomb some of these places because they are booby trapped. Every single house I went to in Gaza had explosives, Nazi propaganda, anti-Israel propaganda, ammunition, weapons, rockets. Every single house, with not even one single exception. And I'm not going to send my soldiers to go into a house when they have so much explosives so it'll collapse on them. But if you're going to bomb a house, you have to let the people who are in that area enough time to be evacuated. So Israel has sent about 8 million pamphlets, 13 million text messages, 15 million phone calls to tell people you have to be evacuated and go to another place. Well, we go into this area where we know and we can see that it's being used as a headquartered by Hamas. We have an entrance to a tunnel here. We have rockets here. That's how I and the West, I think, have a whole different understanding of reality.
And, when you were talking about what's in the tunnels, of course, I'm reminded of the command and control center that was right below the UNRA headquarters.
I didn't need this war to know how horrible UNRWA is. I lost friends in Protective Edge. They went into an UNRWA medical center and the building collapsed on them because it was Hamas headquarters. UNRWA, regardless of the war, I'll give a short explanation about UNRWA. Forget about Israel. Forget about my bias, okay? All of the refugees in the world, about 30 million, they are all under one agency. UNRWA has a different separate agency. That by itself is a violation of the UN Charter, which is supposed to treat all groups equally. One group here is getting a different agency to itself. All of the other refugees in the world, about 30 million, have about 6,000 people working for them. None of them can be the recipient and the giver of the money or the funds that they're receiving, right? You cannot say I'm giving you money and I'm the receiving of the money. In UNRWA, you have about 5 million people. We can talk how it reached 5 million people with about 25,000 workers, which is more than 4 times for the rest of the refugees all over the world. And the recipients are also the people who are enjoying the money. Now let's talk about how UNRWA has 5 million refugees. All over the world, when you're thinking about a refugee, you need to think of the bell curve, meaning you had people living somewhere. You had a lot of refugees because something happened, a disaster, a war, some sort of I don't know, earthquake, whatever, and then they are getting to be resettled somewhere else. So the curve goes back to zero, or tries to get back to zero. With the Arabs and UNRWA, basically it says that everyone who was in Israel, I don't remember the exact dates inside, but let's give them the broadest definition. Everyone who was in Israel between 1946 and 1948 and their descendants from their father's side. So Gigi Hadid is a refugee. You can be an American citizen and still be a refugee. You can be a resident of Germany, a citizen of the UK, adopt a child in China, and that child would be a refugee according to UNRWA. So for them, the chart, the graph is not going to go down ever. It's only going to boom. It's only going to become bigger and bigger. This is, regardless of Israel, this is something that does not match any of the UN's own criteria of how it's supposed to treat other people and how it's supposed to treat all groups in the UN equally. Now let's add to that their involvement in terror. I'm going to put aside the incitement, the moderate UNRWA schools where they teach that Jews are descendants of apes and pigs and it's positive to murder them. Their connection to terror did not begin in this war. Their connection to terror began when they gave money for Hamas uniform, when they gave money to build the equivalent for the Hamas Navy SEALs, when they gave money, when they gave salaries. You have people who are under UNRWA who are also Hamas terrorists. To add on to that, I've seen with my own eyes time and time again. One of these things was published. If in an UNRWA school, we found a sniper rifle inside a teddy bear. I don't know if you saw that. I've seen this many, many times. Handguns in UNRWA bags, grenades in UNRWA bags. But let's take it to the next level. On October 7th, we now know that UNRWA employees entered Israel and murdered, raped, mutilated, decapitated the heads of Israelis. So yeah, if even without talking about Israel, UNRWA should have been shut down many, many years ago. When we are adding the Jewish and Israeli concept of it, this is a horrible organization. It's basically a UN organization that is directly connected to terror.
Before we move on to what happened at Berkeley and what you're hearing on college campuses and what you're sharing with students and others at universities, just one or two more points about Gaza. I've heard people criticize the IDF and these are so-called intelligent people, but again, they're getting this Western narrative. They're listening to National Public Radio, NPR, or as some people call it, National Palestinian Radio. They're reading the New York Times and so on. And we're seeing what's happening on college campuses, and they just don't get it when it comes to the difficulty that the IDF has. And you've shared a little bit from a personal perspective about what you experience, but can I just have you zero in a little bit more on the real choices and challenges that the IDF faces on a daily basis going into a place like Gaza?
So two things before I'll give you an example from what I have experienced in Gaza.
Sure.
Before the war, there were 200 Arab kids who were forced to dig tunnels for Hamas, and they were killed in the process. Now, when you're going to read it in the news, you're going to read about Arab casualties in Gaza. So they're going to say, oh, it's probably from Israel, even though it has nothing to do with Israel. It's literally a direct action of Hamas. Another example I'll give you, again, before the war. In every army operation that we had in Gaza before the war, there were more rockets that Hamas launched at Israel that hit Gaza than Israel. Again, more rockets that Hamas fired at Israel hit Gaza than Israel. But if you have casualties from this, the world is going to blame Israel. When in fact, I would argue it's the exact opposite. Every drop of blood that is being shed in Gaza is on the hands of Hamas and not the IDF. In fact, the war would have been ended right now if Hamas would have returned the hostages and surrendered. We'll have zero casualties on both sides. I'm going to share one story that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
there was an area in Gaza that was supposed to be a no-go zone. Not to the IDF, not to the Gazans, no one was supposed to be there. The Israeli army knew that it's supposed to bomb this place, so we'll have an entrance to a tunnel. And in order for this to happen, you have to evacuate everyone's there, including the IDF, including Arabs. No one is allowed to be there. And people were getting evacuated from that area. We're talking about a fairly small perimeter. And the Arabs from Gaza who went south, they encountered Hamas. All of this is filmed, by the way, and you can find it in the IDF's website. You go to IDF, go to English, go to press release. You have all the different categories. Hamas using human shields. You can find all this. Hamas robbed the people who went south, and at gunpoint, he forced some of them to go back to the no-go zone. And now you have a 24-year-old soldier who sees people going back to the no-go zone. He shoots them because, as far as he's concerned, they might explode on him. Because we know that there were terrorists who ran at soldiers with explosives on them, and they didn't mind sacrificing their own lives as long as they can take the lives of IDF soldiers. So he shoots them. Why did Hamas do that? Because they were able to now know where the IDF is located and fire artillery at the IDF. This is the level that they have their care for the Arabs of Gaza. This is ridiculous because I have more care for the Arabs in Gaza than Hamas has. So are there people who are being killed in Gaza? Yes. I would argue that they're not innocent civilians, or for the most part, none of them are innocent civilians. And those who are innocent civilians, and I do feel bad for those who are casualties of war, it's sad, but I'm just saying that people who are responsible are not the IDF, they're Hamas.
What is your sense of support for that the Palestinians in Gaza have for Hamas?
I don't know. I don't trust everyone who says that they hate Hamas when we get there, because again, when I entered Gaza, every house had explosives, not just people who were. So you have like 40,000 people who are Hamas membership card holders, let's say this. I want to go back to October 7th. About 3,000 Arabs entered Israel from Gaza. About 1,500 of them were Hamas terrorists. About 1,500 of them are what you refer to as uninvolved innocent civilians. So, I think that people sometimes forget that just because you're losing now, it doesn't make you a victim automatically. Just because you're losers doesn't make them the right side. When the terrorists took to Gaza bodies of women. I'm mentioning bodies, and I'm not talking about girls who are alive because that was way worse. The people who are innocent civilians were the same people who were cheering, who were beating them up, who were spitting at bodies. For the women who were alive, there was the same people who were raping them. These are uninvolved innocent civilians. So I'm not saying that everyone in Gaza is involved in this. I would actually argue not. I would say when people tell me, do you think all of Gazans are terrorists? I say no. I'm sure there are innocent people in Gaza. But I just also want to say that I don't think that everyone that is killed and does not hold a Hamas membership card, I would refer to that person as an innocent civilian.
And Ron, the day after, how do you change that culture of hate? Like, where do you even begin with that? Because people have talked about denazification, but for me, this is completely different because you have a religion involved, you have a foreign power, in other words, Iran involved, you have the issues of land involved. This is much more complex than de-Baathification, for example, in Iraq, or denazification, or what happened in Japan after World War II. So I'm just wondering, have you thought about that?
So surprisingly, maybe after everything I just said, I don't think there's any problem, not with Arabs, not with Muslims. I have no dispute, not with the Arab world or with the Muslim world. I actually really hope one day we'll have peace with the Arab countries that are surrounding Israel. The main difference is that the Arabs of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, I would argue that their whole identity is to hate me. That's my opinion. It does make me right, but that's how I understand them. I remember before the Abraham Accords, I was in a panel with a guy from Peace Now, and he said, "Do you hate Arabs?" I said, "I actually don't. I hope one day we'll have peace with Dubai." And he cracked up. He said, "How are you going to have peace with Dubai before you have peace with your neighbors here?" And a year later, I kind of felt like I need to tell him, haha, I was right, you're wrong, because I have no problem having peace with the people in Dubai because they have an identity that's not related to their desire to murder me. And the Arabs of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, I would argue that the only thing that they have that connects them is their hatred towards Jews. By the way, not towards Israelis, towards Jews. It's true that they also murdered a lot of Arabs and they have Arab hostages. So they also have a hate for Israeli Arabs and Israeli Druze and so on and so forth. But in their charter, they're saying to murder Jews. So I'm not sure that the combination is because it's a land or Arabs or Muslims. I think that the combination is it's a very specific group of Arabs that have been brainwashed for the past, at least since the disengagement, to hate me. And for those who do not know, because maybe there's one or two listeners who don't know, so I'm going to repeat this. In 2005, Israel has left Gaza. The problem that Gaza has never left Israel. We don't have a single Jewish person who was in. We didn't have a single Jewish person who was in Gaza in 2005, dead or alive. They even dug out the graves in Gaza. And we were hoping that Gaza would be the new Singapore. By the way, in Gaza, I saw a house that saved the newspaper in Hebrew, declaring the disengagement. Hamas took power in 2006, went medieval on the Fatah people, burning their own people alive, throwing them from rooftops, killing hundreds of people. The world was extremely silent about that. And that was in 2006. We're almost 20 years later. The indoctrination of hatred is something that is inconceivable. There are so many houses where I found pictures of young babies with grenades attached to them. This was not in every house, but in many, many houses. And please understand that these grenades are not grenades that are manufactured in a normal factory with safety inspections. These are grenades that when we encounter these grenades, we wanted to get rid of them as fast as we can. And we would try to find a tunnel to throw it into that tunnel because it's a grenade. If you shake it too much, it's going to explode. And to see people putting this on their babies, I think it's a very horrible mentality. This is how they treat their own babies. And I know how they treat their own people. I don't think that they're going to be able to accept me in the foreseeable future.
Do you see a way of turning that around in terms of, and then,
Mm,
and just sort of related to that, also sort of the day after? I mean, what are some of the scenarios that are going to take place once the IDF has mission accomplished?
I don't know. I think that the thing that's most important right now is to understand that the only entity that should control Gaza is Israel. I heard something that I found was ridiculous, in my opinion. It's my opinion. Someone said, let's give it Gaza to the moderate PA. Like that's how this all issue started. We gave it to the PA, Hamas took power. And for those who do not know, 70% of the Arabs of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza support October 7th and wanted to happen again. In Judea and Samaria, for the PA, they had elections in 2006. That was the last time they had an election, and that is because if they would have an election today, Hamas would win by a grand slaughter. They would not even try. It would be an easy win. And the only reason why Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen is still alive is because the IDF is there to protect him. So to give it to the PA is such a lack of understanding of what is happening on the ground in Israel. So as far as I'm concerned, there's one thing that I do need to know from this, and that is that um, you have to have Israel in control in Gaza. No, I'm not saying this with great joy. I don't see any other alternative. To give it to any other entity, in my opinion, would be a horrible mistake.
And Ron, really, before what's going, I know about 5 or 10 minutes ago, I said, okay, just one or two more questions. But again, I could talk to you all day on this because, again, you have such intimate knowledge, and we really appreciate your joining us. But before we move on to Berkeley and what happened to you, and also generally what's happening on college campuses, the hostages, I don't have a question in particular, but anything that you want to share in terms of their fate right now, in terms of the best way to get them home.
In my opinion, the best way to get them home is to pound Hamas as hard as we can. I don't envy for a second the families of the hostages, so I don't have any dispute with their campaigns, but I just don't think that that's going to work because if I'll tell you, I'll give you everything you want for your shirt. Please give me your shirt. You're just going to raise the price, and our neighbors are not Switzerland or Sweden. Our neighbors are enjoying the fact that we were arguing about this. The way I see it, and I was in Gaza when we had the first ceasefire. The reason why we had this ceasefire was because we hit Hamas so hard that they begged for a ceasefire and they're willing to give us hostages for that. I just want to say that when people sometimes say, well, we're going to give them terrorists, they're going to give us their hostages, it's not the same. You cannot compare, the Bivas family, the kid, this young baby who's 1 year old that was abducted from his home to a terrorist that stabbed an Israeli civilian and was arrested and put in jail. The equivalent is ridiculous in my mind. Um, but at the end of the day, I think that what is important is that Israel will not cave to the international pressure. And I'm not saying to ignore diplomacy. Diplomacy is important, but at the end of the day, a father deserves his daughter back home. And I don't need to elaborate what goes in a father's mind when his 18-year-old daughter or 19-year-old daughter is currently held by terrorists in Gaza for 150 days and what she goes through. And that father deserves his daughter home. And any other entity in the world can think whatever they want to think about Israel or come up with whatever lies they want to say about us, but these families deserve their family members back home. I am speaking on behalf of every single soldier that I've met. We're here for the win. The win means the annihilation of Hamas and the return of the hostages back to their families.
And really, one amen to that. And really, one more thing um, that I want you to weigh in on. It's this notion that in the West, you have these men at the United Nations wearing $800 suits and Hermes ties and talking about a ceasefire and talking about these very lofty things. They don't understand warfare and they don't understand perception and what it means to be strong in the Middle Eastern context. In other words, that's what Hamas, that's what the Iranians, that's what people in the region really respect, is that strength. This is an Eastern war. It's not a Western war. And if you can just share your thoughts about that, just real briefly.
Well, the thing is that I think that these people in suits, I think they know that. I think that they're just using the rules of the game in order to gain their benefit. The losers of Hamas, and I'm saying they are losers because we had a ceasefire on October 6th, and to go and they're so brave when it comes to babies in their cradle and Holocaust survivors. That's when they're brave. But then when they're fighting the IDF, they're begging for a ceasefire. And you know what's going to happen the day after we have a ceasefire? They're going to say, "Oh, we won, we won," and they'll be correct because if they still have the hostages and if they're still standing, then they won. So I think that is the way I see it. You're right that it is a war that has different values than what we understand in the West. But I think that they are aware of it and they're doing this on purpose. And basically, that's their game plan to attack Israel, hurt Israel. And when Israel responds, they say, look at us, we're suffering here. And they couldn't care less about the people that are suffering Gaza. I think that's the main thing, maybe that for some people in the West, they are unable to understand because they're seeing these catastrophes. I'm going to put aside the Hollywood, the fabrications, and the fact that many of these people are killed because of Hamas's action. Let's talk about really the innocent family that is killed in Israeli airstrike because they weren't able to get away, maybe because Hamas did not let them. That is very, very sad. But these people, that for Hamas, that's the plus. They don't care. For them, it's a good media coverage, and I think that's what the West doesn't understand.
All right. Well, let's move on now to what happened to you at Berkeley and generally what's happening on college campuses.
So I'm going to Berkeley. There's some sort of organization in Berkeley that published before I went there that I have blood on my hands and I'm a genocidal murderer and I need to be shut down. So this was a private event in Berkeley for the Jewish students. It was moved, I think, 3 times to different locations. In the last location, I think they even kept it secret and only gave it to people who have RSVP'd and they're known by names to the people who organized the event. It was not open to the crowd. I go in and I ask the people who are in charge of security, what do you do in case the protesters barge in? I said, don't worry, we have security, everything's fine. Before the event even began, the amount of protesters, I would even call them protesters, I would say rioters, because it was a riot, it wasn't a protest. Maybe at least 200 students. They banged on the door, they actually broke the glass of the building there, barged in from 3 different doors, um, covering their faces, obviously. Um, and I was willing to continue. I said, I'm not going to give a presentation. I'll just go directly for Q&A for the people who don't like me and want to ask me difficult questions. And then someone from the university said, we're going to have to ask you to leave. I was like, I'm willing to stay. They said, no, you're going to have to leave. So basically, I was shut down by the university because I was willing to continue and stay there. I said, okay, I'm not going to get in trouble with the university. So I wanted to go through a back door, which is kind of embarrassing, I think, but okay. But there were two people from the protesters who were with us with their face covered. And I said, well, I'm willing to go, but the protesters are here with me. You're sending me, and they had their hands in their pocket. It looks very suspicious. Like you want to maybe separate us from the people who are protesting if you're sending me through that door. And I thought the university was extremely irresponsible. At the end, I find myself and my wife being escorted to a door that leads to the street, and said, "Okay, good luck. Just send us out there." So now from here, you didn't even escort us to the car. Um, I thought it was weird, to be honest. My feeling was that the university could not care less about what's happening. Basically, just wanted to have no liability in case something happens to us on campus. And the security, I have no disputes to the police officers that were there. They were doing the best that they could, but I just felt that they were really not prepared in the more, when it comes to the university itself. And it just felt like they were kind of happy with the fact that they had to kick me out.
Who was it that told you that this wasn't going to go on?
I don't know the name of that person. I have a picture of him. I have no idea what his role is in the university. One of the faculty members.
And so, I mean, that's just shocking that they didn't even escort you to the car. And by the way, I mean, when it comes to like, they're talking to the wrong person here because clearly, I mean, you're an IDF soldier, you're in an elite unit, and you know what security is all about and how security should be handled. Were you able to meet at all with students to engage with them there? And if so, what were they telling you about life on campus? And what are you hearing in general, really, about life on campus today?
So unfortunately, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I forgot maybe the most important part. I'm not the issue here. I'm not that interesting. They physically attacked three students.
Yeah.
One girl was choked in the neck. The marks were not very pleasant to see. She didn't join the IDF and she's not fighting in Gaza. There's no reason why she would be choked when she's going to a lecture. So basically, she was punished. Okay, she was punished for wanting to hear someone. Yeah, I'm trying to understand where you draw the line here. Another girl, I don't know if it was her fingers or her wrist that was broken or sprained her wrist because of the rioters. Another guy was shocked. He said they just spat on me and shouted at me, "You Jew, you Jew." So I think it's a very unsafe environment for the Jews in Berkeley, and I think that that's the main issue. I think it's sad. I'm not the issue here. I'm not that famous. It was kind of surprising to me to see all these protesters coming and
You were
rioters.
you were the excuse that they could unleash their Jew hatred. And this is what's so interesting, Ron, because people say, oh, well, if we say we're anti-Zionist or we're anti-Israel, we're not anti-Semitic. But this really, that argument really falls apart at a place like Berkeley and really throughout the country, doesn't it?
It does, but to add to that, you also have Jews who took part in the riots. Yeah, people who said, "Well, with all respect, this guy, me, I'm a genocidal murderer."
Well,
Instead,
they're self-hating Jews is what they are.
I think it's a lot of different issues. I think that they think that if they will be anti-Israel enough, then they will be accepted by the society. Um, I wanted to say two more things here. I have a concept in a Western democracy where I believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. I don't think it's right, but I can understand people saying you're guilty unless you prove to me that you're innocent. But in this case, I was guilty and I did not even deserve a trial. And I think that that is not a Jewish issue or an Israeli issue. It's the collapse of Western civilization. I think that's the main issue here. Like if I were an American who's not Jewish, I'm like, okay, now they're attacking this guy, Ran, but next time they can attack anyone who's going to talk about anything they want to talk about that's political. So I think it's more of an American issue than a Jewish issue or an Israeli issue. You asked me if the students were able to hear me. I wasn't even able to say, hello, my name is Ran. Like we didn't even start the session. Only about 10, maybe 12 students were inside this gigantic hall after moving us three times. And most of the students were not even able to enter. After that, later, they asked me to, because I stayed in the area. First of all, it took me a while to understand where I am when they just kicked me out to the street. And I didn't had a car there. I got a ride with one of the people who was in charge, the organization that brought me there, Club Z, which is a fantastic organization. which I would love to elaborate on. So I was waiting for the person who brought me there to find him. So I stayed there for a few more minutes, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And then they said, would you be able to give the lecture in another location? I said, yes. So it moved to a location that's off campus. I won't share the location right now, but because I don't know if, no, actually, I think it's okay because they shared it. So I actually spoke at the Chabad house afterwards.
And God
Um,
bless Chabad. We love them.
I definitely say thank God for Chabad, or as they say, home away from home. I thought if I should say it because I didn't want Chabad to suffer the backlash, but if they published it, then I'm assuming that they're okay with it. And yeah, it is quite amazing. I just want to shout out, first of all, for Club Z for arranging all of this because they're a fantastic organization, and
And we've had Masha on the program, we've had Colonel Kemp on the program, and we love Club
amazing.
Z.
Yeah, amazing organization. And I also want to
Yeah.
say a big shout out for Chabad because what happened was that a student called a rabbi, Rabbi Gil from Berkeley, and he said, Rabbi, can we have an event in your house? And he says, when? I said, now. It's like, how many people? 50, 60. Like, sure. And I said, okay, wow. So him and his family just quickly organized, the chairs and the tables and whatever. So I spoke there.
So you
Honestly,
spoke. So you spoke at Chabad for Club Z,
yes.
not for the Berkeley event.
No, I
Yeah.
spoke for Jews. I think assuming almost everyone there was Jewish,
Uh-huh.
who came to Chabad to hear me speak. In Berkeley, I did not speak at all. Did not
Right.
say one sentence in Berkeley.
But that was the Berkeley Chabad, is what you're saying.
It's not. It's off campus.
It's off. Yeah, yeah. It's off campus, so it wasn't a Berkeley event, University
It
of
was
California,
definitely
Berkeley,
not a
as such.
Berkeley event.
In one sentence, for our listeners that might not be familiar with Club Z, share what Club Z is. And I want you to share what you're hearing generally on college campuses and what you've told the kids at Club Z and what you're telling people on college campuses today.
Club Z is a teen organization that educates children, teens, Jewish teens mainly, about Zionism, giving them the empowerment that they need. So later, when they go off to college campuses, they can be the leaders in their campuses. So they give them a lot of education, history, law, different types of skills that they should have. Amazing people doing amazing work. They're, I would say, one of my favorite Jewish organizations
Me
that I
too.
have the pleasure of working with, doing fantastic work. College campuses. I agree with Club Z that college campuses are too late. When people come to a college campus, there's already like everything is ready to attack the Jews. It doesn't matter if you're pro-Israel or anti-Israel; they're going to attack you. You're going to be a target because you're Jewish, and you can try and prove how much you're anti-Israel to be accepted. But I think you're always going to be suspected of um, of not being anti-Israel enough. Um,
And so, what are you telling the Club Z kids, or what are you telling also kids on university campuses that you've been speaking to?
Oh, I'll definitely tell them that they have to learn. They have to be educated. We have to know our history and we have to know about what's happening on the ground. I tell people when I give this lecture, I tell them, look, my only real added value is that I was there and I have my experience. Ask me questions. If I say something that doesn't add up, we can talk about it. But most of the accusations against Israel are very easy to disprove. And at the end of the day, they need to be prepared. It doesn't matter if they want or if they don't want to. They need to be prepared. They need to know who they are, and I tell them, stand tall with your back straight and your chin up and don't be intimidated by anyone.
Where do you think they're getting this, and where do you think it's coming from before they get to college?
Well, the anti-Israel sentiment, as I said, I just opened the New York Times today and it says, like, there are no lives in, I don't remember exactly the title, so I don't misquote, but something like there are no more lives in Gaza, 30,000 deaths. It's like, let's hear the stories. Like, okay. And it began by saying, since the war broke. Like nothing happened since the war broke. The war broke between two sides, not the invasion, the genocidal invasion of Hamas, the terrorist group who openly calls to do October 7th again and again and again and again. So I think that's why people are getting it. And when I see these young teens, sorry, when I see these young college students who are extremely uneducated and they're saying October 7th did not happen, it was actually conducted by the IDF, and if it did happen, then you deserve it. Like, well, okay, you really need to educate yourself. But when that is the sentiment all over, that's what the students are going to hear when they get to college.
And just finally, as we wrap, because I know you've got a very tight schedule, this goes back to number one, education, but it goes back to something that you hinted at earlier. This is an attack on Western democracy because, again, it's not just Hamas. I mean, this is an attack on free speech, free assembly, and so on. And you want to just wrap us and take us home with that thought.
Yes, please. Thank you. It's amazing because all of this is actually a concept of they said that when you see how they treat the Jews, it's usually a good way to understand how they treat other minorities and other groups.
It's the canary in the coal mine, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the people who are protesting outside in Berkeley are the rioters who barged in inside. it the main issue here is not that they were upset about the violation of human rights in Gaza. Their whole concept is a little bit distorted because they think that if they accuse me of something, it makes it real. They're actually protesting about the fact that Hamas is losing. But the way that they conduct this is that they want to intimidate people. They want to cancel people. They want to cancel everyone who's not in the, as they call it, the right side of history. Now, to support Hamas, you don't need to be a right winger or a Zionist or pro-Israel to condemn Hamas. Hamas, the organization that marries 12-year-old girls to 40-year-old men. Hamas, organization in its charter says murder all Jews. Hamas, who says Israel is little Satan, but the U.S. is big Satan. To support that, and there was a survey in Harvard that showed that between 18 and 21-year-olds, more than 50% thought that the solution for our conflict is to give the area to Hamas. That is the collapse of the Western civilization. You are allowed to disagree with me. You're even allowed to think in your own mind that I'm a genocidal murderer, even though it's based on nothing. But to attack someone who came to listen to me, I'm just trying to understand, where do you draw the line after that? Would you attack someone who's friends with someone who came to listen to me? Would you attack someone's family member of someone who came to someone to listen? Like, how would you draw the line? So at the end of the day, this is an attack of the Western civilization, the concept of freedom of speech, the concept of you're innocent until proven guilty, the fact that you cannot just put people on a pedestal and say, I'm going to equivalent you to this utopian bar that no one has ever reached, but you have to also be a little bit more connected to the facts, and you have to have knowledge, and you have the ability to have a civic conversation and not just a shout out. And I think that's the main problem.
Ron Bar-Yoshafat, we're going to leave it right there. We want to definitely have you back here on IsraelCast for more. We want to thank you so much for joining us. And once again, Mazal Tov to you and your Kala, your bride, on your recent marriage. We want to thank you. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you real soon. And again, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right. And we'll have info about Ron on the show notes page of this episode on our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. Of course, we do release new episodes of the show every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, I don't know why you would want to do that. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. Simply search for IsraelCast. And by the way, I may be doing a couple bonus episodes as well. So stay tuned for those. And don't forget, of course, whatever episode you listen to rate and review us, because that really helps with our rankings, which in turn make it easier for more folks around the world to find us. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/IsraelCast. And indeed, it takes a whole moshav to put IsraelCast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Dara Shapiro, J.D. Krebs, and Ellie Kadrin. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada from Miratone Studios right here in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top until the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. IsraelCast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. And for more info about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say hello, I know Ron would love to hear from you, and so would I. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Once again, israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.